Every financial advisor in the U.S. will tell you, with absolute certainty in their voice, that you need at least $2 million to retire comfortably. The more confident ones say you should aim for $3 million. The most conservative, always pushing for absolute safety, don't hesitate to throw out $5 million. An entire retirement planning industry has built its whole business model around convincing you that freedom is a luxury so extreme it's practically unattainable, that getting there requires decades of sacrifice, penny pinching, grinding away for 40, 50 years, and that retiring before 65 is a naive fantasy reserved for those born with a silver spoon or lottery winners. They repeat this message so often it becomes common sense in the public's mind. But they're all wrong. Not just a little wrong, they're catastrophically, fundamentally wrong, because they're optimizing for the wrong variable. They don't start with the question, how do you become free? They start with, how do you maintain your current lifestyle for the rest of your life? And then build a massive number around that. They calculate the money you need based on sustaining your current lifestyle in your current location with your current spending habits, as if you're a statue cemented in place for life, never allowed to change a thing. I'm going to tell you something completely different. I won't ask, how do you keep your life exactly as it is until you're 90? I'll ask, how much money do you need to never have to work for anyone ever again? That's the far more important question. I'll tell you the amount you need, so that every morning you wake up not checking meeting schedules, not scanning company emails, not prepping presentations for the boss, but simply deciding, what do I want to do today? You spend your time based on what truly matters to you, not what pays the monthly paycheck. You have enough passive income that going to work becomes an optional choice. You do it if you feel like it. Quit if you're bored, instead of a 40-year ball and chain. That's a completely different set of questions, leading to a completely different system of answers, and of course, a completely different number. And the answer to that second set of questions, the only set that actually matters if you value freedom over appearances, is $300,000, not $3 million. Not $2 million, and just $300,000. The number sounds so small compared to what you've been told that most people's first reflex is to snap back. No way. Too naive. You don't understand reality. But before you rush to dismiss it as fantasy, give me a chance to walk you through the math behind it. Let me show you the geographic arbitrage calculations the financial services industry desperately doesn't want you to discover, because once you see the full picture, you'll realize the $3 million to retire model is largely a product of a system that deliberately overstates your true needs. Because if you really understand these numbers, if you let logic, not fear, guide you, you'll see that you can buy freedom in 5 to 10 years, not 30 or 40. And that means they lose decades of asset management fees, commissions, complex financial products, and everything else they live off. See? The price of truth, from their perspective, is too high. Keeping you scared and financially ignorant for another 10, 20 years is an incredibly profitable business for them. For you, paying with 10, 20 years of your life just because you followed bad advice is a tragedy. What I'm telling you isn't dreamy philosophy or motivational slogans. It's math. These principles have held true for nearly a century, and unless the world turns upside down, will stay true for decades more. The problem isn't the math, it's the definition. Everything starts with misunderstanding retirement from the very beginning, and they exploit that misunderstanding to lock you into the old model. The retirement planning industry has cleverly convinced most people that retirement means maintaining exactly the same standard of living you had before retiring, in the exact place you're living now, for the rest of your life. If you're currently spending $70,000 a year while working, they immediately build every calculation around ensuring you can keep spending that $70,000 forever after you stop. It sounds reasonable, even kind, because who wouldn't want to keep the familiar life? But when you start examining the hidden assumptions, you see a ton has been left out of the equation, especially the reality that people can change, needs can change, locations can change, and most importantly, your big goal isn't to stay the same, but to be free. Their first assumption, you'll want to spend the same amount as now, or more. That seems obvious, but it's completely wrong for most people. Most spending during the working years is compensatory. Money spent to console yourself, cope with stress, buy convenience because you have no time. You eat at expensive restaurants because you're too drained to cook after a long day. You buy work clothes to fit the office environment. You pay for short, pricey vacations because you only get 2 weeks off a year and have to make it count. You get a car far nicer than basic needs just because the daily commute is exhausting, and you tell yourself you deserve something comfortable. You spend on entertainment, hobbies, shopping, not because they're inherently important, but because they're temporary painkillers for job pressure. Now imagine removing the job from the equation. Suddenly, most of those expenses aren't necessary anymore. You have time to cook, so as a result, costs drop and meal quality rises. You don't need a full work wardrobe. You don't need to burn money. In your 1-2 week vacation, you don't need a luxury car to offset a grueling commute because there is no commute. Stress drops, and the need to shop to de-stress drops with it. A lot of what seemed normal in your budget turns out to be a direct consequence of the job, not of life itself. When you remove work from daily life, the real cost of maintaining a good life, a quality, meaningful life, not bare survival, tends to be 30% to 50% lower than the cost of the same life while working. That's something standard retirement spreadsheets never show clearly. If you keep using the wrong spending assumptions, you'll always get gigantic money needed to retire numbers, and then believe you're stuck in the work treadmill for decades more. Their second assumption, the financial industry plugs into every model. You'll stay forever in the exact place you live now. But the question is, why? Why stay in an expensive city when the job, the only thing tying you there, is gone from your daily life? This is a simple question most people have never seriously considered, because until now, they've never been allowed to imagine fully decoupling where they live from where they work. The job chains you to geography, and you mistake that chain for personal choice. Cost of living differences between cities worldwide aren't just big, they're enormous, enough to completely reshape your financial equation. Between San Francisco and Lisbon, the average difference is about 70%. Between New York and Chiang Mai, it exceeds 80%. Between Seattle and Medellin, the gap hits 75%. What does this mean? It means the standard of living that costs you $5,000 a month in the U.S. can be achieved for $1,500 or even $1,000 elsewhere. Not scraping by, but living well, beautifully, healthily, and even higher quality than standard U.S. middle-class life. And here's the key, that difference isn't in lower quality places. Quite the opposite. Many places worldwide have higher quality of life than the U.S. in multiple ways. Year-round pleasant weather, clean and fresh food, diverse culinary culture, relaxed pace, cleaner air, stronger community bonds, closer nature, pedestrian-friendly infrastructure. The irony is that many Americans are buying a stressful, expensive life they think is normal, while most of the world lives slower, healthier, and astonishingly cheaper. The only reason not to consider those options is that you're currently tethered by work or by family. But if work is out of the equation, and if family isn't a major barrier, the entire world suddenly becomes an available menu of choices. Where you live becomes a flexible variable, not a fixed one. And when geography is flexible, living costs become something you can optimize, not endure. The third assumption financial advisors deliberately don't explain clearly. They say you need to replace income. But the truth is, you don't need to replace income. You only need to cover expenses. These are two completely different concepts. While working, they seem linked because income determines spending power. But in retirement, or more accurately, when work is no longer mandatory, income becomes meaningless. Expenses are the only number that matters. If you can live comfortably on $18,000 a year, you don't need $70,000 income to maintain your lifestyle. You need $18,000, period. And this is where the math really starts to shine. Invest $300,000 in dividend funds and global index stocks at a 4% yield, and you get $12,000 a year in passive income. That's $1,000 a month. In the US, $1,000 a month puts you in the poorest bracket. But in Portugal, that's a comfortable middle-class life. In Thailand, it's upper middle class. In Vietnam, Colombia, Albania, or dozens of other countries, $1,000 a month is a comfortable, safe, clean, modestly prosperous life. Not just surviving, but living well. The financial services industry never tells you this. The reason is simple, and hilariously sad. If they did, you'd be free soon, and they'd lose clients. If you knew $300,000 was enough to achieve financial independence and quit at 40, you wouldn't pay them fees until 65. They'd lose 25 years of revenue. Their model depends on you believing freedom is too distant to even consider. So instead of honest math, they give you 40-year inflation projections, 95-year life expectancies, exaggerated healthcare costs, and models assuming you'll live forever in the world's most expensive places. But if you simplify the equation to its true essence, how much do I need to live well? You'll see $300,000 is a strange number, small enough that many people can reach it in 10 to 15 years, but large enough to buy freedom for the rest of your life if you use it in the right place, the right way. Importantly, the $1,000 a month standard isn't bare bones. It's equivalent to middle class in many countries. You have a clean, nice apartment, healthy food, affordable, high-quality healthcare, good public transit, fast internet, fresh air, safe and stable life. Some places even exceed U.S. middle-class quality of life, just at a quarter of the price. If you're geographically flexible, you can truly live this way. If you accept that location isn't the only barrier, you open a door most Americans never dare look through. And that's why tens of thousands of people, aged 30 to 60, are living this model right now. And the number grows every year. Now that you understand the three core wrong assumptions the financial industry relies on, we need to dive straight into the most common objections. The questions almost everyone asks immediately, often instinctively, sometimes out of fear, and sometimes because they've never truly examined the data. I've heard these objections hundreds of times, and the truth is they're reasonable on the surface, but collapse completely under real-world scrutiny. First objection, almost always number one, what about healthcare? This is the concern Americans worry about most, and honestly, it's understandable. The U.S. has the world's most absurdly expensive healthcare system. Not just expensive, but insanely so. A minor ER visit can cost thousands. An average surgery runs $20,000 or $50,000. Private insurance can easily be $500, $1,000 a month, depending on age. If you leave the U.S. and lose employer coverage, the danger feeling is real. But here's what most people don't know. The rest of the world doesn't operate like the U.S. developed countries like Portugal, Spain, Italy, France, Germany, many Eastern European nations, and some in Southeast Asia have public health care systems with extremely low costs, consistent quality, well-trained doctors, and modern equipment. All you need is legal residency, which many countries grant easily, and you get public health care for a few dollars to a few dozen dollars a month. In Portugal, the national system costs about $40, $50 a month and covers almost everything except very complex cases. In Spain, you access a top-tier European system for similar fees. In Thailand, Malaysia, Mexico, Colombia, private hospitals meet international standards. English-speaking doctors, modern facilities at 10 to 20% of U.S. prices. A knee replacement that's $40,000 in the U.S. is $8,000 in Spain, $4,000 in Thailand, with equivalent quality and often better service experience. Americans are brainwashed that foreign healthcare is unsafe, but they don't know that many hospitals in Thailand, Malaysia, Singapore are JCI accredited, the same certification many U.S. hospitals lack. Medical tourism is a billion-dollar industry for a reason. Great quality, far cheaper, more humane service. So when someone says, I'm scared of bad healthcare, what they're really saying is, I don't know what's outside the U.S. And that's just lack of information, not truth. Second objection, what if inflation spikes? How do you survive if prices skyrocket? This is a question from people who truly understand math and care about sustainability, so it's respectable. But it has a clear answer. The 4% withdrawal rate, withdrawing $12,000 a year from $300,000, is built on over 100 years of historical data. Global stock market returns average 7% annually after inflation. So if you withdraw 4%, your capital still grows around 3% a year, matching long-term inflation. That ensures your purchasing power doesn't erode over time. Plus, most people living geographic arbitrage retirement don't rely solely on $12,000. They often add $3,000, $5,000 a year from light freelance work, online teaching, content writing, consulting, translating, community management, simple design. These optional income streams easily offset inflation and even improve quality of life. Not because they need to, but because when you're not exhausted from work, you have energy to create, and creation makes money. Finally, inflation in most low-cost countries isn't like the US. In Europe, 1 to 3% is the norm for years. Living costs are flexible. If prices rise, you can move to a cheaper area or country. When your life is mobile, you optimize over time. Third objection, I have family and friends. I can't leave them. This is the most emotionally deep objection. Family and close relationships matter, no denying it. If you have elderly parents needing care, young kids in school, or special ties, then yes, you can't move freely. But for many others, this tie mostly exists in their heads. Grown children don't need you next door. Most adult parents and kids maintain bonds via video calls and periodic visits. Friends often shift by life stage. The best friends at 20 aren't the ones you spend most time with at 40. Moreover, expat communities worldwide are incredibly tight-knit. People choosing non-traditional paths find each other and connect deeper than old friendships because they share mindset, values, and courage to go against the grain. Many leave the US fearing loneliness, only to discover their social life is richer abroad. Fourth objection, what if something bad happens? What if I suddenly need a lot of money? This is the most practical question, and the answer is equally practical. You still have the $300,000 principal. You're not burning it. You're only withdrawing the 4% interest. If an emergency hits, serious illness, major incident, urgent flight back to the US, you can absolutely withdraw more than 4% that year. The 4% isn't a shackle. It's the optimal rule for longevity. But if you must break it, the asset is there to protect you. And if after 5 or 10 years of freedom you decide to return to work, you absolutely can. A 50-year-old who lived 10 years freely in Portugal or Thailand, with $300,000 still intact and rich life experience, often has more advantages than a burned-out 50-year-old office worker. Freedom creates strength, not weakness. At this point, instead of theory or concepts, we need real numbers, because only facing actual data reveals the full deception in the traditional calculations the financial industry imposes on you. When you look at real living costs in different countries, you'll understand why I keep stressing that $300,000 isn't a pipe dream, but a completely achievable threshold if you optimize geography. Let's start with Lisbon, Portugal's capital, considered one of Europe's most beautiful and livable cities. It's not cheap by European standards, but compared to the US, it's from another world. In Lisbon, you can rent a safe, clean one-bedroom apartment near supermarkets, metro, and fragrant cafes for about $650 to $850 a month. Utilities, including fiber optic internet, fast enough for remote work without worry, cost around $100. Fresh, clean, delicious food, if you cook regularly with occasional eating out, runs $300 to $400 a month. Portugal's strong public health care for residents costs about $40 a month, cheap enough that many Americans think I'm misstating it. Clean, punctual public transit costs $30 to $50 a month. Phone is $20. Entertainment, coffee, cheap flights around Europe, $20 to $60 one way, at $100 to $150 a month. Total, living in Lisbon, a civilized, safe, warm climate European city, ranges from $1,200 to $1,400 a month, or $14,000 to $17,000 a year. That means comfortable middle-class life in a gorgeous European city costs one-third of basic middle-class life in many second-tier U.S. cities. If Lisbon is the good value Europe option, Chiang Mai, Thailand, is a true paradise for those wanting gentle, peaceful living without financial strain. In Chiang Mai, you can rent a modern apartment with pool, gym, 24/7 security for $300 to $400 a month. Utilities and blazing fast internet cost about $50. You can eat out nearly all week for around $300 a month because Thai food is clean, fresh, cheap, and incredibly tasty. Private international standard health insurance costs about $100 a month. Scooter rental for easy city travel is $50. Phone $10. Entertainment $100. Total $900 to $1,000 a month, or $11,000 to $12,000 a year, to live in a year-round warm city with top-tier cuisine, low cost, good infrastructure, strong expat community, and some of Asia's best healthcare. Countless Americans and Europeans moved to Chiang Mai for a few years and realized they never want to return home, because here they live lighter, healthier, and freer. For a completely different vibe, Medellin, Colombia, is a perfect example. Nicknamed the City of Eternal Spring for its 68 to 77 degree year-round weather, never too hot or cold. You can rent a one-bedroom in upscale areas like Poblado or Laureles for $400 to $600 a month. Utilities $70, food $250, high-quality private health insurance $120, clean modern public transit, cheap taxis at about $60, entertainment, coffee, social activities another $100. Total, comfortable living in Medellin for $1,000 to $200 a month, or $12,000 to $14,000 a year. And remember, this isn't minimal. It's comfortable, safe, high quality, in a modern city with everything you need. For stark contrast, look at the U.S. In a second-tier city like Austin or Denver, not New York or San Francisco, you'll pay at least $1,500 to $2,000 for a studio or one bedroom. Utilities add $150. Food, if cooking, about $500. Health insurance $400 to $700. Car payment or transit $300 to $500. Phone $60. Entertainment $150. Total $3,000 to $4,000 a month, or $36,000 to $48,000 a year, just for average U.S. living. To withdraw $36,000 at 4%, you need $900,000 invested. For $48,000, you need $1.2 million. Looking at these numbers, you see the absurdity of the need $2 to $3 million to retire. Advice: the truth is, you don't need that much. You just need a more flexible lifestyle, a broader perspective, and a willingness to optimize something everyone can optimize: geography. Now that you see $300,000 is absolutely enough to live freely in any low-cost country while maintaining a quality of life far above U.S. middle class, the next question is always, how do I get that $300,000? And this is where most people get skeptical, thinking the number is so big it's out of reach, as if only high earners can touch it. But that's because they've never looked at compound interest data, never understood that time and discipline have far more power than income. Accumulating $300,000 isn't luck or privilege for a tiny group. It's the inevitable result of a simple, consistent process. If you start at 25 with a normal job paying $75,000 to $100,000 a year, and you live a bit more frugally than peers, not starving, just avoiding lifestyle inflation, saving $2,000 a month isn't impossible. That's $24,000 a year. Invested properly, in low-cost index funds, passive strategy, no emotional trading, no market guessing, 8% average annual return is completely normal. At that rate, after 10 years, you have $360,000, meaning at 35, you've crossed the threshold to safely leave the work treadmill. If $2,000 a month is too much, $1,000 still gets you there, just with more time. With $12,000 saved annually and 8% average return, after 15 years, you have about $270,000, nearly there. Add a few more years of work, or simply move to a lower-cost U.S. city, or boost income a few thousand a year from side gigs, and you cross $300,000 without sacrificing your whole life. After 20 years, it's not $270,000 anymore, but around $460,000, way beyond what's needed for freedom. That's the power of compound interest. Quiet, patient, relentless. And the best part is, it doesn't require genius, big risks, insider info, or the White House. It just requires time and consistency. The accumulation phase in practice isn't glamorous. It doesn't look like the wealth flex photos on social media. There's no spotlight. It's simply choosing to live below what you earn, automatically routing every raise into investments instead of upgrading apartments or phones, avoiding consumer debt like poison, choosing a used car over a shiny new one, is just for show, cooking at home most of the time, doing a few side hustles or small projects when you have time. You track spending meticulously to know where your money goes. You don't spend on things just to impress. You spend on what truly makes you happy. You pay attention to small habits because you understand discipline isn't one big decision, it's thousands of small ones every day. Many reading this will say, sounds exhausting. And yes, if you optimize for current comfort, it does. But those optimizing for future freedom see it as liberating. They see that every skipped phone upgrade, every rejected new car, every declined expensive hobby just for social media clout brings them closer to the day they never have to wake to an alarm. And when you get that, you're amazed to find frugality isn't sacrifice. It becomes strategy. It becomes empowered choice. The irony is most people say they want freedom, but their spending proves the opposite. They spend on short-term comfort, on I deserve it, on social media image, on moments to replenish energy drained by work, but they don't spend to buy freedom. Meanwhile, the rare few who truly value freedom spend differently, think differently, and end up living completely different lives. They don't wait until 65 to start living. Most of the $300,000 isn't a money problem. It's a mindset problem. It's the question of what you value. Small ease today or big freedom tomorrow. It's whether you want to live for weekends or for your actual life. And once you choose the right direction, once you live intentionally, that $300,000 stops being distant. It becomes inevitable. Of all the objections I've heard about geographic arbitrage retirement, one doesn't come from math, healthcare fears, or family concerns, but purely from emotion. I don't want to live abroad. I want to stay in the U.S. I want to keep my life exactly as it is, just without working for it. This objection exposes the core issue most clearly, that most barriers aren't financial, they're mental. When someone says they don't want to live abroad, what they're usually really saying isn't that they hate other countries, but that they've never given themselves permission to experience anything beyond the familiar. They were born in the U.S., grew up in a U.S. city, studied in the U.S., worked in the U.S., and thus conclude the whole world must be like America. They confuse familiarity with optimality, what they know with the best they can have. But in reality, if you step outside the borders once, you'll find life beyond the U.S. sometimes fits who you are better than the place you've known for 30 or 40 years. Interestingly, many who swore never living abroad changed their entire view after just one short trip. They spend 2 weeks in Portugal, then realize the fresh morning air, fragrant coffee, fresh food, slow pace, and walkable narrow streets make them feel more at peace than anywhere in the U.S. They visit Mexico for a few weeks, then discover the natural friendliness, amazing food, low costs, and surprisingly pleasant quality of life. They go to Thailand, then find the locals' gentle smiles, warm weather, and relaxed tempo heal a mind exhausted from years of work pressure. Many don't believe they can be happy abroad until they try. And when they do, they discover the shocking truth. Not only can they be happy, sometimes they're far happier than in their old life. When I say this, I'm not speaking from theory. I'm speaking from thousands of real cases. I've seen Americans in their 30s, 40s, 50s, even 60s move to low-cost countries and say they feel reborn because suddenly they have real time. Suddenly their health returns. Suddenly they're not paying $3,000 for a cramped apartment, not spending 2 hours a day in traffic, not blowing every weekend on stress relief they never escape. The big issue here is psychology. People overvalue the familiar over the better. They cling to the comfort of routine, of places they know, even when those places no longer serve their best interests. They think they love America, but often what they love isn't the country. It's memories, youth, the safety of knowing the roads, stores, how everything works. But those things don't equal quality of life. They just equal habit. And habit is a double-edged sword. It makes life easy, but it also keeps you in places you no longer belong. I'm not saying everyone should live abroad. Plenty have valid reasons to stay in the U.S. Family needs them, kids in school, specialized jobs, medical conditions requiring special care, or they genuinely love American culture in the deepest sense. Those people just need a larger nest egg to sustain their life. Nothing wrong with that. But there's a huge group, far larger than they realize, who believe America is the only option, when in reality, that's just a conclusion from never trying anything else. They've never lived a month in Lisbon, never tried a week in Medellin, never felt the morning air in Chiang Mai, never sat on Ja Nang Beach with a $2 coffee and seen how simple and beautiful life can be. If you're in that group, you don't have to believe me right away. I don't want you to believe me just because I say so. I want you to see for yourself. I want you to do what 99% of people never do. Test your own assumptions. Spend 1 month in a low-cost, high-quality place. Lisbon, Porto, Valencia, Chiang Mai, Da Nang, Medellin, Oaxaca, Penang. Rent a small apartment, cook, walk, experience life like a real resident. Not rush tourism, but slow, real living. After 1 month, you won't need me to convince you. You'll know the answer yourself, because your life's real data, real emotions, real experiences will replace every old assumption. And then you'll see the door to freedom wide open in a way you never imagined your whole life. When you reach the end of this reasoning journey, you may start to realize what very few are willing to admit. Freedom isn't a luxury gift for the ultra-rich. Freedom isn't sold for $2 or $3 million like financial advisors deliberately make you believe. Freedom isn't the result of a life sacrificed to exhaustion, grinding until 65, then finally starting to live. Freedom is simply an equation most people have never been taught to solve correctly. And when that equation is rewritten with the right variables, it becomes closer, clearer, and achievable far faster than you ever thought. The essence of financial freedom isn't owning tons of money. It's reducing expenses to the point you no longer trade your life's time for every dollar of income. That's why $300,000 has such strange power. It's not a magic number. It's just a reasonable one, big enough to sustainably generate $12,000 a year, small enough that most disciplined people can reach it. It sits at the intersection of achievable and enough to live well. And that's why it opens a different door to life, the door to optional work. The word optional sounds light, but its power is revolutionary. When you're not forced to work, everything in life changes. Work becomes meaningful activity, not obligation. You choose to work because you want to, not because you must. You no longer tolerate bad bosses just to keep a paycheck. You no longer accept ridiculous policies, pointless meetings, exhausting days just because rent is due or medical bills loom. When income no longer determines your right to exist, you start making choices based on your true values, not fear. Freedom also changes how you see the world. When you live in a low-cost, high-quality of life country, you start noticing things you never had time to feel before. Quiet mornings, wind through the window, aimless walks just to enjoy your body moving, carefully prepared home-cooked meals, long conversations with friends, uninterrupted by work emails or looming deadlines. You have time to read, learn, build skills, experiment with ideas, create something of your own. Freedom isn't emptiness. It's space to be yourself. And when you live free, something interesting happens. You start earning extra money without trying. When you're not exhausted, you have creative energy. When you have creative energy, you create value. When you create value, you make money. Many leave the U.S. with $300,000 planning minimalism, but after a few years, their accounts are larger than when they left. Not because they grind, but because they do what they love. Teaching, writing, consulting, small business, design, content creation. And it naturally brings income that fits their rhythm. Freedom unlocks the innate productivity the industrial life crushed for years. But to get there, you need the courage to ask the question most people avoid their whole lives. What do I really want? Do I want freedom or just comfort? Do I want to live or just exist in the familiar model? This is a hard question because it forces you to face yourself, to see through the habits, fears, invisible ties you've carried for half your life. But it's also the question that liberates you, because an honest answer tells you which group you're in. If you're in the group that truly wants freedom, not just fake safety, then $300,000 and a few years of discipline is the golden key to a life most people never dare let themselves imagine. You don't have to wait until 65. You don't have to let the youngest, healthiest, most creative years of your life be swallowed by the work machine. You don't have to live by someone else's script. You can choose a different script, one where you're in control, one where you say, I've lived enough by others' demands. Now I'll live by what I want. And if you're truly ready to walk that path, then 2026, or whatever timeline you choose, can be the year you step out of the treadmill and into your real life. You just need to start calculating, start saving, start testing cities, start building portable skills, and start preparing your mind to become a free person. Freedom is much closer than you think. It's not at the end of life. It's a few years of determination, a few smart choices, and a little courage to do what the majority never dares. The only question left is, do you want it enough to go get it?